This is the Mettleset.
So now we already touched upon this earlier. 50% of the population have a menstrual cycle, have periods.
Yeah.
And it's really poorly, understood. Even I will admit myself included,
same.
It was never taught in school. You just kind of understand, this happens once a month. That's it. And I guess hormones really play a lot into an athlete's performance and how you're feeling and how you perform.
So what is the common knowledge around hormones and women training on their menstrual cycle or the cycle itself during their training phases? So what do you see from female athletes in terms of knowledge?
It's a good question. So as I kind of touched on before, like the overall summary is we don't really know for sure. Like that's the answer, and more research is needed. What we do know is that there are kind of two distinct phases to your cycle. There's the phase where your body is getting ready for a potential pregnancy, where your hormones are high, where you're having these fluctuations, where you have a spike in estrogen and LH to enable your ovaries to release an egg. Then you have a spike in progesterone, which prepares your uterus for accepting that egg. And then there's the phase where the body says, okay, it's not happening this month. Let's reset.
Yeah.
And we know that in that second part of your menstrual cycle, our bodies behave a lot more like men, like that kind of like low hormone side of things. And we know that in the first half of the cycle, we women are really different. And that, as I mentioned before, like the laxity in our tissues, we know that happens around ovulation. We don't really know why. We know that people may struggle with bloating, water retention, that kind of thing. But in terms of like, when should you lift? When should you do your endurance session? No one can answer that question really at this stage. What we can talk about is how you get the most out of your body, how you manage your symptoms, and if they're not manageable, how is best to do that. So, for example, we used to put everybody on the pill if their periods were a problem. Now that is an option still, but the types of pills that we use are really different in athletes. We try to use pills that are newer formulations that don't suppress some other hormones. The way the combined pill work is it suppresses your hypothalamic axis, just like low energy availability does. And so it can be detrimental to bone health. It's weird, right? Because again, when I first started in sport, the pill was a treatment for people with no periods. The doctor would put them on the pill. That is still done by some doctors, but we shouldn't do that. Like the evidence is that women who have red S or low energy availability and no periods should have HRT. It's that kind of estrogen which is beneficial, not the pill. The pill creates a false sense of security for that. Because you just have your withdrawal bleeds every month and everyone thinks, oh, great, your periods have come back. Well, they haven't. It's fake.
No,
it's just a withdrawal from the pill. So that's where our knowledge is how to manage. That knowledge has improved significantly. Being absolutely clear on when you should do what in your cycle. No one can tell you that with clarity, unfortunately. Wow. Someday we will be able to, but just not yet.
Just on that, just going back to the point, though, some people having their PBs or, performing their best when they're on their period. Yeah. Can you talk us a little through that?
Yeah,
and why that is?
Yeah, good question. Well, again, no one really knows.
I mean, for
it's
me,
a mystery.
I ran my best 10K, but I think I was trying to run and find a washroom.
Well, there's motivation. Logistical motivation.
But I was really surprised that I did that.
But I think, I guess on the simple terms, the theory behind that, if we're looking, again, if we go back to caveman days, or what is your body trying to achieve in the first half of your cycle? Well, it's using its energy to get the egg ready to release the egg, to thicken up your uterus, to get ready for pregnancy. And so as females, that evolutionary wise, that is what we were designed to do. I hate to narrow it down to that, but that is what we were meant to do. And when that doesn't happen, then we get this kind of extra, okay, well, you can chill out a bit now and you can go and gather some sticks and build your house and whatever else cavemen used to do. And so if you look at it from that perspective, you can understand why in that second half of the cycle your performance may be better because your body isn't wasting its time on getting ready for pregnancy. It's it's got some other stuff that it can.
So is that also because then your testosterone is higher, or is that something that's just maybe a myth?
The testosterone, again, more research needed into testosterone. I think it's more to do with our female hormones in that second half of the cycle, because we know testosterone levels as a woman are lower than men. They don't have massive peaks and troughs throughout the cycle. I think maybe a small part of the factor, but it's not a huge, not as far as we know. So,
but when you're training, throughout your cycle, basically, are there things that women should keep an eye out for as far as their hormones are concerned? Something that could be, again, a red flag and something that they should then address and go see a doctor.
Good question. Anything that impacts how they feel, right? I guess it's different for everyone. So I have looked after athletes and patients who have super heavy periods and crippling pain, and that's normal for them. I have this discussion daily, right, with female athletes, and I always find it funny. Ask, are your periods heavy or light or in between? I mean, how do you know what other women's periods are like? Right? Nobody knows. So I always ask that question alongside the caveat of what size tampons do you use? Do you use a pad and a tampon? How often do you change your tampon? Because that's the only way you can quantify it, really. Because let's be honest, no one knows what everyone else's periods are like. How would you? And so I think people's normals are really different. So in terms of red flags, red flags for me would be having bleeding in between your periods. It's not normal. A little ovulation bleed around ovulation day, so around about day 14, that can be normal. And if I would still see a doctor for assessment of that. But if that's the only thing that's happening, then okay. But bleeding in between your periods, bleeding after intercourse, super irregular cycle that's new, or loss of your cycle, those are all things that need looking at, and they all have different causes. So bleeding in between your periods, bleeding after intercourse, we're not looking at sports-related stuff there. We're looking at pathology that might be other gynae things. Loss of your periods may be related to sport, but there's other things that can do that too. Pituitary tumors cause you to lose your periods. Thyroid problems cause you to lose your periods. So I wouldn't encourage any woman to think, this is just because of sport. It's a diagnosis of exclusion. So you exclude all those other things before coming to that decision. Otherwise, then it's just about symptomatic things that are impacting you as a woman. So, if you're mood swings are intolerable, if you may be hitting that perimenopause and you're struggling with dry skin, vaginal dryness, all of that stuff that no one talks about, that, those are things that should be addressed and can be addressed. Particularly in cyclists, a cyclist hit perimenopause and menopause, vaginal dryness on a saddle, it's really uncomfortable. It can cause bleeding. It can cause a significant amount of pain. No one talks about it, And so those are things that should be addressed. Shouldn't just be putting up with them. There's treatment that can help.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about menopause and perimenopause in a minute. Just in terms of looking at your cycle, and I know everyone's different, is there certain kind of, should that impact away a woman's training, or should she consider certain elements or eating or fueling?
That's another we don't really know.
Or sleeping, additional sleep, because I'm now maybe I'll get a bit more sleep in the first half of my cycle.
I mean, I'm forced to. I'm so tired that I have to sleep more.
And I think that's it. You've got to do what feels right for you. And so what I would encourage women to do is to be familiar with their cycle. So if you have a non-hormonal cycle, particularly, so if you have a natural cycle, you're not on hormonal contraception, just get familiar with what that is, track it. There's a good app, Fitter Woman, it's called. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I think I have it.
FITR Woman. It's a really good app where you can track your cycle, and it gives you that kind of information of, okay, we're in your high hormone phase, you're in your low hormone phase, and this is maybe how you might feel. But for me, it's just more about becoming familiar with how you feel and picking that apart. Because I think, we've all had periods for most, if not all, of our adult lives,
Yeah.
and if you ask a woman, does this happen at this particular point? Most often the answer is, I don't know,
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important as a sports person, you look at every other aspect of your life. You should be looking at your period to find out when you might perform better for you, because like I said, that evidence of across the board is just not there consistently. But looking at when you might perform best and then adjusting your training to how you feel is currently that's the best that we have in terms of guidance.
I guess we have a listener question later on in our episode on supplements, but in this case, I feel like I'm tired because I anyway have an iron deficiency. Are there supplements that women should be taking in this case?
Yeah. I would encourage any athlete to consider female athlete to consider supplementing iron. I often use the analogy of like a leaky bucket for iron, right? Because we have a period every month.
Yeah.
So we lose a load of iron and then we replenish it and then we lose a load. So if you test female athletes' iron, it's very unusual to see a good level of iron. And for an athlete, I would be aiming for a ferritin level of above 75. If you go to like a normal doctor, the reference range is that anything above 30 is fine. So that, and we know increases aerobic capacity and muscle endurance. So it's a no-brainer for me. So I would take a ferritin supplement. Ferritin's better absorbed with vitamin C, and
ferritin's a type.
Yeah, so ferritin is iron.
Is iron,
yeah. So whatever you can tolerate. Like medical iron is better; it's better absorbed, but often people don't tolerate it. Like it can cause gastric upset and constipation, and it's not particularly nice to take. So there's like herbal supplements. Floridix is the kind of herbal iron supplement, which is better than nothing. But taking it with vitamin C is helpful, and vitamin C is helpful for immune function. So I would definitely use that. Not taking your iron supplement with tea. Caffeine reduces absorption, not helpful. Or coffee, obviously. So yeah, iron supplement's super important for a female athlete. And then stuff around period time. So magnesium can be helpful around periods. If you suffer really badly with period cramps, then aspirin can be helpful. I would tend to use that over other anti-inflammatories just because of the way it works. It can work a little bit more effectively. What else? I would use zinc as an immune booster, particularly around times of stress. So like if you know you're going to be doing a hard training block, we know hard training, even with normal energy availability, reduces immune function. So making sure that you're doing everything proactively to improve that. That can be helpful as well.
For people who aren't keen on taking too many supplements, what would be the food alternatives to some of the supplements that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good point because I don't really eat meat at all.
Yeah.
Like, fish sometimes and stuff. So I know, like, my sister is always like, you need an iron supplement.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm tired. I'm like, leave me alone.
Me too. I'm vegetarian. I was a swimmer. And my mum used to like feed me full of vitamins when I was a kid. And she thought I was going to die or something. It's hard, is the truth. But things like spinach, leafy green vegetables, pulses, lentils, beans, all have a fair bit of iron in them. It is very challenging to get enough iron from your food, though, if you're an athlete and you're a woman. It really is, particularly if you don't eat meat. So even if you don't take it every day, like using some sort of like Floridix is the really like gentle alternative, like as a herbal supplement. I think that's a reasonable option.
So what is it made of? Like, is it
Floridix? Good question. Flowers.
It's plant-based.
Something,
basically.
it's plant-based.
Right.
It's got flowers on the label. Let's go with that. Petals. I don't know. But it doesn't have as much iron in it as medical grade iron, but it is usually really well tolerated. So, looking at your diet, optimizing everything you can. I agree with you. I'm not one that's big on taking supplements. Those are the things, if you are going to, people ask me that all the time, like, what should I take? And I'd rather you eat a whole food diet that's healthy. But zinc, vitamin C, iron, vitamin D, those would be my 4 if you're going to take anything.
Yeah, I think I'm going to look into that because I'm very big on gut health and microbiota and like diversity of plants in my diet. And I know, one of my friends, she lifts weights and she's you're not eating enough protein. And so I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. The protein thing is important.
Yeah.
I think.
Just for recovery as well, right?
For recovery, and there's a certain point where you start to lose muscle mass. Sarcopenia is a real thing. Unfortunately, it happens. On my way here, my husband just ordered me my first ever whey protein box. After, I think I was 40 last year, and I think I really see a difference in
bone density
and muscle mass, and so there is some evidence that using that kind of protein, particularly whey and casein, there is some evidence that can help with muscle building. Now, if you're in your prime in your 20s and 30s, forget about it.
I sometimes wish my folks had the same knowledge, because I can see them they're 70, they're above 70, and I can see how they've shrunk and their muscle mass is just vanished, and it's vanishing every day, right? There's a % that they lose every day, and it's so upsetting to see. And obviously I do as much as I can now so that I'm not in that situation when I'm 70, because I want to be healthy and I want to be running and I want to be cycling and I want to be doing everything at that age.
I mean, I guess that lends itself though to weight-bearing exercises, right? Because we met at CrossFit and I used to do a lot of CrossFit and weightlifting, and now I do a lot of cycling. And I've just noticed, I think naturally I'm quite muscular. When I do body analysis, those body analysis machines, I haven't really lost much muscle mass and probably gained some in my legs, but definitely noticed my booty is smaller. I need to stop cycling and start doing some squats. But I think as you get older, what would you say to people who are only doing cardiovascular endurance sports? How important is weight-bearing exercises as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really important is the short answer. You need to be doing more power-based activity. So that doesn't have to be lifting weights. That's not for everybody. But it could be
resistance training.
Yeah, resistance training or plyometrics, jumping, hopping, skipping, anything where you're putting weight through your bones, but also because of that sarcopenia, which is a normal part of being a human and aging, you have to stimulate your muscle more, and so just doing endurance training is not enough to do that. You have to add some sort of resistance training in. There's some really good evidence that bone density is a real problem in cyclists for exactly the reason you said. You sit on a bike all the time.
I feel really good about going to the gym this morning.
Yeah, well, totally. But it's all about balance, isn't it? And I think the reality is that our bodies are not designed to do one sport. We're designed to move in lots of different ways. And we're living much longer than we were probably designed to. And we just have to alter what we're doing and adjust how we live. And I think our generation we just know so much more, right, than our parents. And you're right, you see elderly people now with really poor muscle mass. So
frail.
And, there was, I don't know if you read about the study, it's probably about 6 months ago now, that said that if you could stand on one leg, I forget how long it was now, that was your predictor for death in the next 10 years or something.
Did you immediately do that then?
Clearly. Everyone did, right? But I think you can see the logic behind that. It's about muscle mass. It's about sarcopenia. One of my good friends from uni is a care of the elderly consultant, and she did all her research on sarcopenia and the effect that has. And it's a marker for the rest of your body health. That's all, So if we can reduce the effects of muscle loss as we age, then the rest of us will be better too, for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation with you, because we've learned a lot, and absolutely our listeners are going to take away a lot from this as well. So thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure.
This is the Mettleset.